Hello, good afternoon, class. So, today we will pick up from where we left yesterday and we'll talk about regulatory enforcement, FDA Form 483, warning, and then later on globalization. Okay. So, this presentation will explore the critical aspects of regulatory enforcement by the US FDA and we'll cover the Let's start with what FDA Form 483 is and why regulatory enforcement matters. So, regulatory enforcement matters because we need to ensure safety, quality, and efficacy of healthcare products in the US. Therefore, regulatory enforcement is important. To maintain that, FDA inspects, monitors, acts against violations of the current good manufacturing practices, if there's any misbranding or any marketing compliance. This will further, protect public health by enforcing regulatory standards and compliance. So, yes, regulatory enforcement is very important to ensure safety, quality, and efficacy, and to protect public health. Okay, and this is done by the FDA authority. So, what is Form FDA Form 483? So, FDA Form 483 is an inspectional observational report. Okay, what is it? It's an inspectional observation report which is issued by the US FDA. Okay, they basically issue this document to a company at the end. Investigate. Okay. Hello, am I audible now? I'm so sorry, I did not read the message. Okay, let's start again with Form 483. So, Form 483 is a document which is issued by the FDA investigators to a company that at the end of an inspection, when the investigator who was conducting the inspection violations of the FDA regulation. It will list all the inspectional observations, also can also be applicable status. Okay, so mainly two things could be violated. Uh, the first one is your CGMP regulations for drugs and biologics, and the second is your quality system regulations. Okay, so yeah. So Form 483 is issued after inspection when conditions possibly violate Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act or 21 CFR standards. For 21 CFR standards, you can refer to US FDA websites and you can read about the all the standards that come under 21 CFR. Okay. The key characteristics of FDA Form 483 is it's a non-final but influential document. It just gives an observation that's been made during an inspection for the manufacturing plant or the company to act on it. Okay, it lists observable conditions but not conclusions. Okay, like for example, they found that the air purifier is not working properly in the manufacturing plant. So they'll just put in an observation in the FDA form 483. They will not conclude uh, because the air purifier is not maintained, it is causing XYZ results. They will not do that. They will just put in an observation that yes, we found that this thing is not working properly, or if that there is a loophole that we found, but they will not come to a conclusion of what the problem is leading to, right? So, this is what Form 483 is. It is also presented to a senior management when this inspection close, so that he knows what are all the inspectional observations that's been found during the inspection. Okay, so common violations and responses that can be found during the inspections are your inadequate SOPs. SOPs are your standard operating procedures. For example, you have not maintained the company only has 15 days corrective action plan. Okay. Of F43 so that you can go through the content of that. Just give me a second. Okay, so let's talk about drugs here. Okay, so as you can see, there are a few headers: citation program area, site ID, reference number, short description, long description, and frequency. Okay, so in citation program area, they've mentioned the area where inspection area product uh, site where a drug is being manufactured. You can see your food, human tissues have different um, they've been divided in different sections for better visibility, right? So we'll talk about drugs here. You can see the first thing that they've mentioned is procedures not in writing and or fully followed, right? So when you the responsibilities and procedures applicable to the quality control unit are not in writing or fully followed specifically. Okay, you can go to triple star in the columns below to find what more is the problem here. Then is investigations of discrepancies and failure. There is a failure to thoroughly review these. This is a template. Like you have to make sure that these are being investigated, and you have to fill in your observations here in this long description. Okay, like your firm has failed to establish add some written procedures for production and processes control design to assure that the drug products have the identity, strength, purity, and quality that they are purported or represented to possess. Okay, so this is how you file your form 483 once the inspection is done to the senior management. Okay, so that all your findings are in one place, right? I hope you can just read through few of the long descriptions and understand what kind of what kind of setting is done in the inspection during the inspection, what observations are made. See, for example, here in drugs 192 release drug products area, it's written separate or defined areas to prevent contamination or mix ups are deficient regarding operations related to the storage of drug products after release, which means that they might have found an observation where there are not separate or defined areas. Which is causing contamination or mix-ups. So the manufacturing plant needs to make sure that the separate facilities are provided so that they can, prevent the mix-ups during the operations, etc. So yeah, this is how you submit your form FDA form 483. Okay, the contents include, you can see the observation number. This is site number is your observation number. Description of a non-compliant condition. Evidence or examples are provided in this column. And location or area where observation occurred. You also need to mention that in the long description itself that this was the area or location in the manufacturing facility where the observation has been occurred. Okay, these observation overall will include your inadequate documentation, poor facility maintenance, incomplete batch records, lack of training of the personals that are working there, data integrity issues, inadequate investigations of deviations or contamination risk. So these are common observations that's been made during an inspection and reported in the Form 483. Okay, let's move back to warning letters. So this is about your Form 483. Now we will talk about warning letters and then later discuss how warning letters are different from Form 483. Okay? Okay. FDA warning letters. So what are warning letters? Warning letters is a formal or public notice issued when violations are not adequately addressed. Uh, See, you have given an FDA 483 to the senior management being submitted to provide a response days of the issuance of the Form 483. But if they fail to adequately address the violations that are there, then a warning letter is issued and it can lead to import ban holding approvals. Okay. And yeah, that is what warning letter is. And then there are contents and requirements that needs to be talked about in the warning letters, which are specific CFR citations which has been violated, all the violation descriptions, demand for detailed response. So this is what happens when you are not providing an adequate response after a warning letter of or Form 483 has been issued, right? How is Form 483 and etc. The company can resume its regular operations. Okay, for example, during an inspection of a sterile injectable, take for example, there's a manufacturing facility which is manufacturing sterile injectable, and the FDA inspections find out that there's inadequate cleaning of the filling line. When you're filling the sterile injectables, there's not proper cleaning of the line. Okay, and they're missing the environmental. Even if you minor um, how to do is what is Form 483 and warning letters and how they are different. Now, moving on to the recalls, which will talk about removing unsafe or active products. Action recall is basically action to remove or correct products which have violated law, often voluntarily, but can be mandated. Okay, recall is classified in three classes: one, two, and three. The first one is serious or life-threatening risk. If the product violates the law in a manner that it can cause serious or life-threatening risk. Um, is it breaking now? I hope I'm audible to everyone. Okay, thanks. So, okay, moving back to recalls. So, recalls are basically actions to remove or correct products which violate law. These can often be voluntarily, but it can be mandated as well. So, yes, recall is also a very important part when we talk about regulatory compliance, and it's further divided into three classes: class 1, 2, and 3. Class 1 is serious or life-threatening risk when the law that's been violated can be a life-threatening can cause life-threatening risk, then it's classified in class 1. Then there's class 2, which talks about temporarily or reversible harms, and class 3, unlikely to cause any harm. Okay, so how do you initiate a recall process? Once the issue has been identified, there is a root cause analysis that's been done on how, from where, when, and what made that issue in the first place, right? So once the issue has been identified, a root cause analysis will be done to address that issue. Then a notification will be sent to the FDA and the recall will be initiated, right? We need to publish notices for class 1 and 3 and then monitor effectiveness and file closure reports. Okay, so that is how you do a recall process. It's more detailed than that, but I have given you an overview of how recalls happen. We'll talk about a case study later, which will provide you better insight on how a recall is done. Then there's corrective and preventive action, also referred to as CAPA. In CAPA, you have to identify or detect non-conformities or compliance issues, then investigate, where you perform a root cause analysis using tools like Fishbone or Five Eyes, etc. Then a corrective action or the immediate step to fix the issue is being taken. Then preventive action is being talked and identified what preventive action can be taken in future to avoid or prevent the non-conformity or compliance issues that have been faced by the company. So a systemic change to avoid recurrence is placed in motion. And then lastly, monitor effectiveness. Once your corrective and preventive action are in motion, you need to make sure that the actions are effective and documented properly. So FDA expects full documentation, real-time tracking, and integration with the QMS to make sure that the CAPA is being followed. Okay, so that is what is CAPA. So four things. The first one is your FDA Form 483, the warning letter, the recalls, and CAPA. We'll talk about a case study here so that you can better understand all the four aspects. The case study we will be talking about is Walsartan recalls, which was a regulatory failure and led to global recalls. So, in 2018, multiple manufacturers recalled Valsartan due to carcinogenic NDMA impurity found in APIs. Right? This happened because there was poor process validation. The process that was being used to manufacture valsartan, or maybe analytical methods that were used to identify certain things like impurities, etc., were not validated and had a poor process validation. Then there were solvents which were used responsible for producing nitrosamines. That was a violation that led to recalling the valsartan. And then there was lack of impurity testing. If you're not testing the product for impurities, then uh, you're making a violation which might lead to recall of a product later on, right? So based on these violations, FDA issued Form 483S and import alerts to EMA and Health Canada, and therefore they had to recall the product. Okay, they all the supplier audits and impurity testing is of high importance to make sure that the product is not product is not violating any laws and is compliant to be marketed. Okay, if there are any violations that are observed, FDA straight up sends a Form 483 and import alerts along with warning letters, which makes the health authorities recall their products in their countries. Okay. So that's a wrap up on Form 483 warning letters, recalls, and kappa culture. Form 83 is your early warning system requiring prompt, detailed response. Warning letters are for public record of non-compliance and failures to act can stall business. Recalls show commitment to patient safety, must be fast and effective. If there's a violation not addressed, if there's a warning letter issued, there has to be a recall that needs to happen. Okay. And then there's kappa and culture, where a robust kappa system and compliance culture prevent crisis and builds credibility. Okay. If you have any questions related to these four topics, please drop them in the chat box before we move on with the impact of globalization on regulatory practices. So these are the suggested reading and tools. You can go and read through FDA compliance manual, FDA recall enforcement reports, ICH Q10 guidelines, which is again a very important guideline to read through because it talks about pharmaceutical quality system. And then WHO TRS 986 Annex 2 for GMP inspection. What all observations can be found out in or during the GMP inspection. Just take a look at all the of what we've read through so far. Take 2 minutes, and if you have any questions, pop them in the chat box. Okay, so let's move on with the impact of globalization on regulatory practices, right? Globalization, as you all know, has profoundly reshaped regulatory practices for pharmaceutical and medical device industries. Companies can now operate across continents, navigating intricate compliance requirements spanning multiple jurisdictions. This presentation further will explore key impacts, including harmonization initiatives, supply chain oversight, collaborative regulatory efforts, and emerging challenges in compliance and innovation. And understanding these global dynamics is essential for regulatory affair professionals to ensure product safety and accelerate market access along with maintaining compliance in an interconnected world. Okay, so globalization regulatory is all about globalization. Okay, you can't just stick to your country's regulatory practices. You need to interconnect the regulatory world. Okay, so that is what globalization is. So this will be your overview of globalization effect on regulatory practices. The first one is your cross-border complexity, the evolution of compliance and risk management. Global supply chain involve multiple countries for APIs, formulation and packaging, creating regulatory challenges in ensuring consistent and quality compliance. For example, We talked about marketing authorization holder in our last class. So, if a marketing authorization holder is based in Germany and is getting the manufacturing done in Norway, so there will be different regulatory challenges that they will face because in Germany they are following different guidelines and in Norway they are following a certain different guidelines. So in order to make sure that both of them are on the same page, we need to make sure that we are able to communicate between those two regulatory authorities and ensuring to maintain quality and compliance even though the MAH and manufacturing are in different countries itself. So the first thing is your cross-border complexity. There are also times when you have to import or export your products to a different country or a different continent altogether. So we need to make sure that the product is compliant with the regulatory bodies and the guidelines that's laid down by the company, by the country in which import or export needs to be done. Okay, so the first thing is your cross-border complexity. Regulatory professionals need to make sure that they know about all the regulatory guidelines and the requirements of those countries where the product will be imported, exported, manufactured, etc. Okay. Second is your evolution of compliance, where regulatory frameworks have adapted with harmonized guidelines and increased collaboration among authorities to address these challenges. Like I said, we need to make sure that we understand the regulatory framework and adapt to a harmonized guideline. When we talk about harmonized guidelines, we are talking about ICH guidelines. Okay, so the guidelines for ICH, which relates to Common Technical Document (CTD), is used for almost all regions across the world to make sure that the submissions are done in a certain manner, which is common technical documentation is different. So, yes, we've harmonized the guidelines to increase collaboration among authorities to address the challenges faced in regulatory. And last is your risk management. So, company, again, more the regulations, more the risks. Okay. So, we need to make intelligent monitoring and export consultation vital to managing compliance internationally. Okay. So, key impacts of globalization on regulatory system. The first thing globalization has an impact on is regulatory harmonization. So, standardizing requirements to streamline multi country filings and approvals is very important for globalization. Then, regulatory collaboration, where mutual recognition of inspection and joint reviews are done to reduce regulatory burden. Then is your innovation acceleration, where global trials and emergency pathways speed up the development and approval. Then there's supply chain oversight, where you have to ensure consistent quality and compliance across international manufacturing sites. Then compliance complexity, where handling varied legal requirements across jurisdictions to avoid enforcement risk is needed. And last is your cost and time pressures. Adopting technologies and system to manage simultaneous regional submissions efficiently will help you manage the cost and time effectively. Okay, so these are a few areas where globalization has had an impact. Okay, like harmonization, regulatory collaboration, supply chain oversight to maintain compliance, to accelerate innovation through emergency use pathways, global trials, etc., and along with maintaining the cost and the time. Okay, moving on to the regulatory harmonization across borders. So, what it means is global regulatory authorities are aligning standards to reduce redundant efforts and enable faster access to market worldwide. Previously in India, Cedisco did not accept eCTD modules, but which led to a longer review periods and it was time consuming, but now recently they have adopted to ECTD for biologics, and that has enabled faster access, faster review, and faster approvals for the product to be marketed worldwide. For example, ICH guidelines Q8 to Q10, M4 and M7 are being harmonized, which promotes quality and risk management. Then the WHO pre-qualification facilitating cross-country vaccine acceptance, and Asian CTD harmonizing dossier formats regionally. Like I said, the most important thing that has happened in harmonization is the CTD harmonizing, because if you have a different settlement for the dossiers, then it gets very difficult and tiring to to review and approve those dossiers. But take for example, we have a harmonized structure in place where we are submitting dossier in one specific format, and it's been approved in FDA. Then it becomes easier to submit the same dossier in non-stringent markets or raw markets, and it reduces the review time significantly, leading to faster market approvals. Okay, so yeah, there are a lot of benefits of harmonizing regulations across borders. First will be your reduction of rework and multiple submissions, simultaneous multi-country filings, which enhance efficiency, improve predictability for multinational regulatory strategies. Okay, so it's very important to harmonize regulations across border. Then comes your global supply chain oversight challenges. We talked about global supply chain oversight here, on which globalization has an impact. So yeah, when we talk about global supply chain oversight challenges, there's complex manufacturing networks to be maintained. There are a lot of regulatory action that needs to be taken and a lot of ongoing challenges. So when we talk about complex manufacturing networks, then APIs from India, formulation in Europe, packaging in the US, each step demands rigorous quality assurance, because uh, it's not always that one establishment is doing all the work from A to Z. It outsources to a certain manufacturer or a testing facility. So we need to make sure that each step, the quality is maintained during each step rigorously. Okay, then regulatory actions, all the sites that are involved in the manufacturing of a certain drug substance or a drug product needs to be inspected by international bodies like FDA and EMA. Then they need to make sure that the good distribution practices for logistics are enforced, good documentation practices are in place, etc. And lastly, sterilization and data integrity to track batches globally. This is again very important to make sure that the batches are safe and effective. Okay. Given the scenario, there are still ongoing challenges which needs to be addressed, like inconsistent enforcement across local authorities, risk with suppliers compliance and oversight, communication delays, and safety alerts and recalls. These are some of the ongoing challenges that needs to be addressed, and we need to find a way to overcome the challenges in order to make sure of the regulatory compliance across the globe. Then enhanced regulatory collaboration initiatives. For example, pharmaceutical inspection cooperation scheme. Because okay, so it's again an inspection. It's a mutual recognition agreement which allows to share GMP inspection finding across countries to decrease duplication. For example, if a WHOPIC GMP is being issued to a certain manufacturing site, then it doesn't need to have multiple inspections conducted, and it can therefore decrease the duplication of the same results over and over. Okay, then access to consortium, so a collaboration of Australia, Canada, Singapore, Switzerland, and the UK to share regulatory review and streamline processes. So if you are submitting dossiers in respective countries, then they do a shared regulatory review to streamline approvals in these countries. Okay, last is your FDA project Orbis, which um, which is simultaneous review and approval of oncology treatments with international regulatory partners to accelerate patient access. So these are few of the regulatory collaboration initiatives that are put in place to improve compliance and to promote globalization. Then there's compliance complexity and legal accountability, where we face challenges like non-aligned labeling, safety data, or dosage approval across markets, diverse regulations on data privacy like GDPR versus HIPAA, and intellectual property, and heightened risk of multi-jurisdictional enforcement action. The solution to these challenges are dedicated regulatory intelligence teams which monitor evolving global requirements, strategic engagement of local consultants for on-ground expertise, proactive risk mitigation through centralized compliance frameworks. Okay, so this is how you can address the compliance complexity and legal accountability. Then global clinical trial and innovation speed, where diverse demographics, emergency pathways, and regulatory considerations needs to be taken care of. When we talk about diverse demographics, global trials enhance data representatives by enrolling varied populations, strengthening safety and efficacy profiles. You're not only conducting trials on a specific populations, but you're also doing it globally. So that gives you a varied population data and helps strengthen the safety and efficacy profile of that drug product. Then emergency pathways, where programs like COVID-19 expedited approval demonstrate how harmonization and collaboration speed innovation. Okay, if there were no harmonization and collaboration, then only maybe one country would have had access to COVID-19 vaccine, but that was not the case. Because of harmonization and collaboration, the speed of innovation improved, and it COVID-19 was accessible to almost all the regions that suffered the pandemic. Okay. Then regulatory considerations, where adhering to multiple authorities' expectations plus navigating varied data localization and ethic requirements are important. Okay. Then pressure on regulatory submission, cost and timelines. There are simultaneous filings that needs to be done. So companies must manage filings across multiple jurisdictions concurrently to reduce time to market. Then technology should be adopted. Implementation of regulatory enforcement information management system like RIMS and ECTD standardization supports efficiency. Okay, AI and automation is of a big talk in the coming years. So AI enabled compliance tools offer enhanced content authoring and regulatory tracking, reducing manual workload. What can be done through AI? Now people are not doing it manually, because then we are able to save the time that takes in doing a certain work which can be AI enabled. Okay. So this is your summary of globalization effects on regulatory practices. If you have any doubt, please ask them in the chat box. Okay, so this is it about the globalization, FDA warning letters, Form 483, etc. If you have any doubts regarding what we've studied so far from day one to day today, uh, we can discuss those questions in your next class. And yeah, do let me know if there are any topics I can help you with. So yeah, that would be great. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you in the next class.